Welcome to this very first episode of Talking Grassroots. I'm your host, Ricky Ettridge, and this is a podcast where we'll be talking everything grassroots sport, predominantly local footy, but we'll cover every topic. And with me is a man who I think is pretty fit to talk about local footy. He's played over 250 games of local footy, gave his hand a little bit of American football back in the day, and was recently a president of a local footy club for 5 seasons. And more importantly, he's my co-host, Ricky Logan. How are you, mate?
Good, mate. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining. How was your Chrissy and New Year's, mate?
Yeah, pretty tame this year. The missus unfortunately has to work through most of it. So, yeah, pretty quiet one, but hopefully do some stuff later in the school holidays with the boys.
Well, that's it, mate. You've still got, 4 more weeks? By the time this comes out, we've got maybe 1 or 2 more weeks before kids go back. Thankfully, my kids will be back at daycare pretty quickly. So, this podcast, mate, we've done a couple of podcasts. We've done podcasts during COVID with our footy club at the time where we sort of spoke to our own players, and then we somehow got talking to people around the world. If you can hear noise in the background, it's just my 1-year-old playing with her baby. So we did a podcast where we spoke to our players from the footy club. We were involved at the Sandown Cobras for a long time, and that got us into talking to people all around the world from local footy clubs. We then tried our hand at something similar to this, where we interviewed local sporting heroes. Unfortunately, the position our footy club was in at the time, obviously me with a young family, that sort of didn't do what we wanted to do. But we thought, you know what, let's bring it back a little bit. Let's still give focus to local footy, but more local footy news and talk about the ins and outs of what happens in local footy.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. We've got lots to discuss coming off off season. It's quite an interesting off season going on with a lot of things happening. A few things happening in different leagues, a few changes on the horizon. So it'd be good to delve into it all. Yeah,
and we'll also try and get some guests on. As I said, the previous podcast, we were trying to sort of fill an hour a week with somebody. We just couldn't find the time. But this one will be, just more talking to the coaches, the presidents, the people that run the footy clubs about their upcoming seasons. And we do have a few connections because this, we are from Halfback Digital Media. We do go out and film games. We do have quite a bit of a connection to a lot of clubs and people involved in clubs now. So I said, Rift, you have played over 250 games of local footy. You're still playing local footy at the moment down at Morty Alex Supers. Tell us a bit about your sporting background, mate, and when did you start playing footy and all the other sports that you did?
I came to footy pretty late to the game, actually. I was 25 by the first time I played my first game of footy down at Sandown. I'd previously been doing some jiu-jitsu, some boxing and stuff, so that sort of MMA training and that, the year or two before coming to Sandown. And prior to that, I played some gridiron under 19s it was at the time. So ended up playing 3 seasons, but I broke my foot my first year. So I missed the whole season my rookie year and would have won a grand final because we went undefeated and won the flag that year. But I was unfortunately on the sidelines in a moon boot. So missed all that, but then I came to Sandown at 25, got dragged down because they needed a few extra numbers to fill out a thirds team, and ended up a few of the boys that I played gridiron went down at the club as well. My brother came with me at the time, and so we started playing at Sandown, and what they say, the rest is history. 15 years later, I was we unfortunately had to make the tough choice to go into recess.
We'll get into that at some point by this episode or next episode.
Yeah. And then when I turned 35, I started playing Supers footy because my old man had a long career of playing Supers. So I went and played for the club he last played for in Frankston. Enjoyed my time there. Got to play in a granny down at Casey Fields in the absolute pissing down monsoon rains.
It was that bad that I lived, I don't think, even 500 metres away from that ground at that time, and I didn't even venture down there to watch you.
Yeah.
And I'll travel down to watch you sort of wherever you play, and that was just too far for me a day like that.
Yeah, no, that was one of the worst conditions I've ever played any sport in, let alone footy, and trying to kick a ball in those conditions was horrendous. But we lost by a toe poke goal in the last quarter that put the team up by 4 or 5 points to win it. So That was disappointing. But then, our good friend Matthew Jolly, he got me down to Morty because he had a couple of mates playing there. He's, a couple of years younger than me, so he started playing Supers and he said, I'll come down and play there. I said I'd fill in here and there. I didn't want to commit to playing two teams, and then before you know it, I'm playing every second week at Morty Alley.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure the story goes that you told the wife that, I'm not going to play Supers this year. I'll just focus on playing Sandown. And Joey said, come down, play a game. You'll fill in. And next thing you know, you'll calculate your games. Like, I need to play 3 more to qualify for finals. Sorry, Tam, I'm playing for Morty now.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much that's how it went.
And then I'm pretty sure you tried to fit some jiu-jitsu in that little very spare time you had.
Yeah, I was doing that. I do that more in the off-season. I try to, But, yeah, it was good. It's been good going down to Morty Alec and joining a new team and having a good bunch of guys there. We made the final the first year playing in the Resis, or the Masters as they call it, in over 35s.
We're partnered with AFL Masters Victoria, and I still can't get my head around exactly what they want to call what. But, Morty, you going down to Morty Alec, I've sort of got involved with the club through halfback and meeting, actually having a someone there actually I sort of knew, which I didn't even know that I knew in Big Ed. And my experiences at Morty have been very welcoming. And when Heater dropped some stuff off for me a while ago now, Cal was like, he's a really nice man. I think you should go down and play there. I'm like, that's why I'm going there. So what about what's your first recollection of watching local footy?
Oh, that'd be my old man playing footy. So my parents split up when I was really young. So I didn't really get to watch my old man play a lot of footy because he would play that on the weekends. He didn't have us kids, so he'd try and work it out like that. But when I got a little bit older and we used to go there, school holidays times and things like that, spend a couple of weeks with him. So I do remember going and watch my old man play so over 35s footy. Like one of the earliest memories I remember him watching it probably like Monbulk or that sort of area. Pretty muddy sort of field, and there was a women's game on before his, and some of these women back then playing footy was some of the meanest, toughest looking women you've ever seen, and that was quite daunting as a little kid seeing, these big women. And back then footy wasn't common for women to be playing, but it's pretty good that it had a women's presence all the way back then, and some of the blokes used to try and hang shit on those women, and it didn't end well for them. But then, my dad actually ended up playing at Edinburgh Reserve. I think it was about 97, 98, for the Southern Lions, they were called. They were an over 40s team. So at that time, they had the Masters was over 40s. And his good mate, Gary Wilson, started that team there at Edinburgh while Sandown was in recess for a couple of years due to some financial trouble and some other things that went on. I remember watching him play there, and that was some really high quality footy for that team. I think they went undefeated. Back then, they didn't actually have finals for the over 40s. It was, social. But teams knew who were the top teams and things like that. And they were pretty unreal team to watch. I got to watch them play at Victoria Park. They played a game there, which would have been like a grand final sort of thing. They got to play a game at the Ted Whitten match. They played a curtain raiser, Vic Metro curtain raiser. I think it was Vic Metro versus Vic Country, so that was a pretty cool thing. So, a lot of local footy was basically my old man. He played until he was 57 years old. Until his knees gave up. First year at Sandown, he did come down and play a couple thirds games with us, so it was pretty cool. I got to play alongside my brother and with my old man.
Yeah, very nice, mate.
And so what about you, mate? Like, how did you get started in footy? When did you start playing, and how long you been playing for?
My story is just that typical young kid, love footy from an early age. As soon as you were old enough to go and play footy, you did. So I started playing footy at, I would have been 7. It would have been 7. I remember we went down the year before and Mum and Dad were trying to get me to play down the year earlier, and I was told I was too small, which was quite funny considering that, when I was under 11s, I was playing with kids that when I was 6 were still small mid when I was 6. So I played for Karen Patterson Lakes, now probably better known as CPL. Played, what did I play there? Played, I think, almost 100 games there, I think. 'Cause I played 2 years of 9s, 10s, 11s, and 12s. And then at the start of high school, we ended up moving out to Cranbourne. So then I went and shifted from under 13s and just played at Cranbourne, then played that through to my 18. So every year, didn't miss a year of footy. And then sort of finished my 18s at Cranbourne and wasn't really too sure where I wanted to go or what I wanted to do. And at the time, Mum worked with who was the captain at the time of Sandown, Robbo. And he was actually trying to get me into Sandown, I think, when I was 16. So I still had 2 years left of under 18s. He was trying to get me down there. And because obviously, being the size that I am, I was a big boy compared to most people at that age. And I sort of made the decision that, I'll finish out playing like underage footy. Then sort of didn't know what to do when I was heading into under 18s, and Mum said that Robbo was still at Sandown, so I ventured down there, and was it 15 years later and still there. I think I've missed, I had one season off in that period where I just sort of lost the love of the game. Actually, no, it was from injury. That was actually one where the doctor sort of told me that I probably need to take a year off of my groins, which I did. But other than that, besides and one big injury, I actually have played there ever since and haven't missed a season. And unfortunately, injuries got me at the end, and COVID stopped that. But yeah, so that's probably my local footy, just sort of standard. You go play when you're a kid and you just play through until you stop, which unfortunately was in the 2022 with a few injuries piling up and the family and surgery required to keep playing. I decided that that was probably enough.
So back when you were a kid playing at CPL, what was the sort of standard like from going to CPL and then moving across at a bit older age over to Cranny? What was the shift like there?
To be honest with you, the actual standard, I don't really remember much of the standard back then. The only thing that I think maybe makes the standard feel a bit different was when I was at CPL, we were just bottom of the table. We'd never, we might have won we won a couple of games. It was like, oh yeah, we won a game. How good's this? But when I moved across to Cranny, the first year we actually made a grand final. So, and was in a good team. So I don't know if it was necessarily skill level, and obviously an underage is big different, but I think just because I went from a team that was barely winning into a team that started winning and then very quickly went back to a team that weren't winning. So I think it was just, I think the difference was that, when I was at CPL, I was playing sort of ruck and full back just because I had the biggest kick in the team. We used to get belted every week, so I was all put the biggest bloke and the best bloke with the biggest boot at full back. And then when I went to Cranbourne, I actually got shifted to full forward. I remember I was like, oh, here we go. Every kid, you want to play forward. They're going to get one go in the practice match. And I was like, oh, shit, here we go. They're going to put me back to full back, and I'm not going to be able to enjoy me footy. And then I think round one, I kicked like 4 or 5, I think it was, and that was it. I've been full forward ever since.
Haven't left the 50 since.
That's actually a lie. I think there's a couple of times under 16s I played full back, and that was purely because we played against, I think it was Mosgiel Park. Might have been Mosgiel Park, or it was maybe Waverley. But we played against a team, and they had a good full forward. And we'd crossed paths a few times in underage footy, and we didn't like each other, but we had that sort of mutual respect for each other. And back when I was younger, I was a real niggler. Like I would get under your skin, and like as a full forward, I would get under the full back skin to really piss him off. So I actually asked. It must have been on 16s because Marky Franken was my coach, and I've gone, oh, can I play full back? And this guy was leading the goal kicking for the league, and we weren't really doing anything special. We were sort of like a mid-range team, probably making finals. He's going, yeah, do it. So I went back there and just annoyed the living shit out of him, and that was about the last time I actually left the goal square, besides the one time I played up in the wing.
So I've played footy alongside you now for 10 plus years, and you've done well to keep it quiet that you've ever ventured to the back line whatsoever, let alone played full back.
There's a big reason I've done that, mate, is because I do not want to go back there again.
Yeah, you've done real well to hide that.
I do think, though, my record sort of holds itself that the club that we were at, I deserve to be at full forward, mate. All right, so we'll get stuck into it, mate. And so first thing we might just touch on, as we mentioned, you are still playing at Morty. You started pre-season yet?
Yep, started. They did about 4 weeks of pre-season starting mid-November to mid-December with a week off for an AGM in between as well. So, yeah, ran for 5 weeks technically, but, yeah, four sessions they did.
So, article was written in the local leader back in December talking about local clubs' pre-season start dates. And the question was sort of put out, how early is too early? And, you know, some clubs, they'll start sort of early November, mid-November. And I feel like at one point, a lot of clubs sort of shifted pre-season to nothing before Christmas, and we just get back into it sort of mid-Jan. That sort of does now feel like it's shifted back to a bit of pre-season. How early do you think is too early for local clubs? Like, you got to think, these blokes are, they're family men, they work. They're already probably at the top level in local footy. You're probably already dedicating 2 nights, a full Saturday, and potentially another one for some clubs. Like, that's a lot of time in season, and then to be asking them to do it out of season as well.
Yeah, so I sort of, reading this article, I sort of flipped and flopped my mindset on it a little bit, actually. And I think if you had asked me this question pre-COVID, my answer probably would have been a little bit different. I would have said, give them off till after Christmas, let everyone refresh, come back January. That's pretty much how I did most of my career. You weren't going to see me much before Christmas. But
you
then
barely see me before March.
Yeah. But I think if the mindset is changed differently a little bit here, I think some of the top-end teams, they're going to do a big running block and they're going to do a lot of running and all that sort of pre-Christmas. And if you're a top-end team, 100%, you probably got fitness standards that you need to maintain and get to, and you don't want to drop off over Christmas. And I know they're doing skin folds and things like that, but that's kind of the standards some of these top end teams want.
I wouldn't be surprised if some of the top level teams are doing that type of stuff though. The skin folds, I wouldn't be surprised.
And we're going to talk about salary caps and stuff later on. When there is a fair bit of money getting thrown around, I can completely understand a decent block pre-Christmas happening. But I also think the important thing is getting back out there with the boys and getting together for our mental health. Yeah. I think a big part of sport that's gets sort of pushed to the side and forgotten about is it is such a great benefit to men's mental health, being out there and having fun and having a kick with your mates and also blowing off some steam. And it is a big outlet for a lot of these guys. So I think for some of these lower end teams that aren't they're not delivering the highest standards, they're not expecting the highest standards, but just getting together like us at Mordialloc, it was get together, have a run around, get the mates together. There's cold beers afterwards for all the blokes, and it's just it helps guys, especially at an older age. Once you stop playing and you have a few weeks off, it is harder to get back into it. So I think that's a pretty important one.
Yeah, see, I'm sort of similar to you. Like, at times I've just been like, what is the point? Like, you've got all this time in season. I think one thing that's my issue with local footy pre-season, pre-Christmas, and probably even maybe pre-Feb, is they look at, understand, you got your fitness, and you just said there's a lot of money being thrown around, so you need your blokes to be fit. I think too many local clubs look at AFL and say, okay, they're doing all this running, we've got to do running, let's put the footies away. And then you're complaining about, a lot of clubs will complain our pre-season numbers haven't been that great. Don't do that, AFL. Bring the footies out straight away. That's one thing I think gets lost a lot when they talk about pre-season is, okay, we don't bring the bowls out for the first month, it's just running. Well, you can do all the running that you want in the world, but you've got about 3 or 4 weeks off over the Christmas break. That running can just go out the window straight away if blokes jump on the piss for too long or eat too much food, which is fine. And as you said, like higher levels, the blokes that are being paid good money to play local footy, they've probably got their own standards and they know they've got to keep up to it outside the footy club. But I think a shift needs to be made, and probably has been made. I'm not really 100% sure. I know that at the club we were involved in, a shift was made in the last few years where footies were out first night. I remember a few years ago, club that we were at, we had a coach come in. If you see me before March, it was a miracle. I was like, I'll come down, I'll see what this new coach is like, because I remember he was talking about footies out first night. We won't be doing stupid running. If you're a midfielder, you'll do your running. If you're a forward, you do forward work, back, you do back work. I went down there, first night, bowls pinging around. End of the night, the midfielders done their running, the forwards did forward, backman did backman stuff. That was great. I think I was at every night before Christmas, and then obviously, unfortunately, things happened over Christmas. He had to leave, and the new coach come in. Mate messaged me, he's like, you come to train tonight? I'm like, I'll hold off, and I'll just sort of see, let me know the feedback, how much running is involved. I get a message, probably, I don't reckon, 5 minutes after training finished, like, yeah, we'll see you in March, mate, because that's too much running for your liking. And that's the thing, like, you want to attract the blokes like me that aren't the fittest blokes in the world but love kicking a footy and love being around. You want them there at pre-season. So have something where they're not running 10K a night, and you actually probably get them blokes there, which then picks up your club's numbers in pre-season, which then takes away this talk about clubs struggling for numbers.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think one thing that is sort of overlooked is, like I said, getting the boys together is probably more important. You could have 50 blokes at training or running laps, right? And you become the fittest team in the land. Then you rock up to your first game and there's no chemistry built within the team. There's no, guys don't, they don't know that this guy's going to lace it out. This guy's going to pop it up a little bit and put a bit of air on it. One's a left footer, one's a right footer, and all those sorts of things. I think team chemistry is a big thing. And if you want to use AFL as an example, AFL has footies out from day one of pre-season. They've been doing their fitness and stuff throughout their off-season. Well, they should be doing it. They've all got their program. But you see, you can go to an open training session at your favourite footy club if you're a member or whatever, and there's footies out the whole time. Yeah, they've got running and they're going to do extra running on top of all that stuff. But they're working on structures. They're working on game plans. They're working on building team chemistry. And if you've brought new players into your club, we're gonna go through all these new signings, all these guys that have been signed at new clubs. You want to know the bloke can actually play footy.
And the difference is, as well, with the AFL, is you've got the balls out, but they'll do a lot of running pre-season, but the amount of running they're doing pre-season compared to even in round 10 at training isn't a hell of a lot different. It might be scaled back a little bit intensity, but they're still running probably 6K a day, 7K a day in season training. So speaking of numbers on the track earlier, mate, we've good news. So obviously, unfortunately, some clubs, will go into recess, and we'll get in touch on that in a minute. But one club that went back in the recess in 2023, who's now back in the outer races, the Yay Tigers. They're setting their sights on season 2024. And apparently they had, this was a couple of weeks ago now, but they had 34 on the track on a Sunday for the pre-season training. Yeah,
it's good to hear. Yay's a sort of small area, country, for those that aren't familiar. But it's good that a club was able to, knew where they were at, knew that going to recess for a year was something they had to do to rebuild the finances and stuff and do what they need to do. And it's good that people have got behind it and supported it and getting it back up and running. There's another club in the area that's within that league that is going into recess, not too far from Yay, and that's Broadford. So you sort of one comes in, one goes out, which is unfortunate.
Hopefully Broadford's is just a similar story to Yay, where one year off and come back in. There's a couple of clubs around the state that have actually, unfortunately, had the issues of going out and coming back in, where Yay, I think Yay's a big one, because Yay's definitely in that sort of area where you can still classify it as country, but it's still sort of close enough to metropolitan Melbourne. Yeah, it's one of those places that's sort of on the way to a lot of places. A lot of if you're coming from sort of out of southeast and stuff, going up to the snow and things like that. There's all, Yay is one of those towns that a lot of people just stop through on their way through to things. So it's good that they were able to get up and going again, and hopefully they're able to have some success. But I was sort of thinking about this league in its entirety a little bit. And I think it's interesting how big this league, the area covers, and I think that's a bit of the problem for some of these teams is Hallam, that's just down the road from us, actually joined this league. And I couldn't think of anything worse than having to travel an hour and a half to go play footy every week. You've got a club who is literally in the suburb that we are in. that played in outer east before they shifted. Like, that's a long way to travel. Like, I understand. I do understand that it's probably, without complete knowledge of the league, it's probably very structured, sort of similar to Southern, where your divisions are sort of almost regionally based, not on purpose is how it works. But, geez, to be travelling an hour and a half for a game of footy.
I did a little research with Broadford going out. Broadford I got a soft spot for because I used to live in the area. I went to school into Broadford for a little while. My brother actually went to school with Barry Hall when he was at Broadford, and he was one of the stars that came out of the Broadford Footy Club. The shortest travel Broadford does is an hour, right? So most teams they have to travel to play is an hour and a half each way.
It's one thing. We're talking about this being like big. We've got any listeners that play out country. They're probably going to be sitting there going, "Oh, fucking hell, that'd be brilliant." But we are talking about outer east, which, as we said, is sort of has some like metropolitan areas attached to it. So.
Yeah, and I think that's a bigger problem with AFL Victoria as a whole, with some of these leagues that are spanning such big areas, but then you've got other leagues that are cross-sectioning that area as well. So Broadford tried to go to the Kyabram Football League, and they got knocked back because I'm guessing they thought that the travel and all those things would be a lot less and would be better if they'd be better suited to that league. Unfortunately, they got knocked back from that.
And when you actually see, right, where clubs in the Kyabram League play and how far like that actually is from, say, Narre Warren, where Narre Warren play outer east, and Broadford are actually trying to get into that league to get out of the outer east, that just shows you the travel right there, like how far wide this outer east league is.
Yeah, again, I'm saying it's probably a AFL in itself, and AFL Victoria probably needs to look at. I think some of these other leagues, there's some other leagues down Geelong Way that are trying to do things to sort of lessen, the travel involved in their clubs. But I think some of these leagues are a bit stuck in their ways. They've had these certain teams in this league for a long time, and they're reluctant to make any changes. And I'm sure we're going to touch on another league that's been reluctant with change.
So from this article that was posted back in November, Yay President Peter Armstrong said that we've signed a lot of players and we're still building. To have 34 at our first training session is good. We haven't had that for a long time. It was good to see a lot of younger blokes and a lot of new people as well as players coming back. It was a great atmosphere. They all enjoyed it. And new coach, Mitch Scully, ran a good training session. So, Yay are obviously going to have the seniors reserves and hopefully under 18s back for 2024, which is actually pretty incredible to go from recess due to a lack of numbers and then be able to bring in under 18. So the flip side of that is the fact that they were in recess. Now, we're involved in a club which unfortunately had to bite the bullet and go into recess this year, which was probably the better of the two options that we had, considering that we went to that AGM thinking that the club's probably going to be on its way out. Now, people have their own opinions of clubs, right? Now, you were the president. We're the Sandown Cobras, right? And you were the president of Sandown for 5 years, 4 years in the end?
Yeah.
All right. Now, obviously, I was the vice president as well. So, one of the reasons that we had to give for why we went to recess was just financial, right? Now, I know that Big Footy is probably not the place you should be fucking looking for stuff, but I read a comment on Big Footy, and someone made the assumption that because we put in our post that it was a financial struggle, that obviously Sandown was in massive debt. Now, as the president who knows the situation, and not just for Sandown, but just for all clubs in general that unfortunately might find this and end up in this situation, do you find the fact that people just assume that you're in clubs in massive debt very frustrating, knowing the ins and outs of what happened? Does that annoy you when people just make these wild assumptions? And then, because it does sort of make sense, because you hear a lot of clubs when they fold or go into recess that they're broke, they owe league thousands of dollars. How does that sit with you to hear stuff like that? Not just for our club, but for any club that's in that same situation where that is just complete and utter false.
Yeah, I think the first mistake you made is going on Big Footy.
I did say that.
I think it is. It's always one of those things that there's rumours are going to go around, and no matter what you do. And when we decided that recess was the best option for us, it was because we wanted to avoid the club getting into massive amounts of debt and then being forced into recess or forced to close the doors altogether. So we were consciously making the decision that we were going to leave the league and go into recess not owing them a cent. We don't owe the league a cent. We don't owe creditors, all the bills are paid basically. We've been in a situation before where the club has been in a lot of debt, and smarter people than us have worked hard to make sure that debt was cleared. And I know other clubs, like you said, have been in a situation. One of the most successful clubs in our time in Southern, or semi-successful, was Mount Waverley. They were in a situation that debt forced them out. This was a team that had only, just before going under, had smashed us by 200-something points. And to find out that they were just accumulating debt and doing those things, obviously there's players still getting paid or promises of getting paid, playing against us that were struggling to keep the doors open and doing the wrong things. We were doing the right thing. We've been trying our best to do the right thing. It's disappointing, but the rumours are always going to be there when you're involved with local footy and on big footy. Some of the best rumours I've ever heard are on there that have never come true. So.
Mate, I honestly reckon it could be a segment, but the problem is you just spend far too long trying to find the 5 biggest, most outrageous theories on big footy, because you'd find 5, you'd flip a page, and there's another one. But yeah, so I just thought I'd bring that up because I did say that and was a little bit like, well, I understand that sometimes it can be true, but you probably shouldn't be speaking out of school. But as you said, that's big footy. So back to, just before we move on, talk about Yay coming out of recession. This is the club that's wasn't in recession, but unfortunately they didn't have a senior team last year. So Rushworth, who play out in the Kyabram District League, last year only fielded a reserves team, won 3 games, where at the moment they've signed a senior coach, and on the actual Kyabram District League fixture has them scheduled to play senior footy. So that'd be fantastic to get a club that only had reserves last year back in playing seniors.
Yeah, and not only signed a coach, but they've signed a former Casey Demons assistant coach, Mark Wheatley. So that's a pretty good, going on paper to be a former assistant of Casey Demons. Must have a pretty decent resume and bring a lot of expertise to Rushworth. So obviously they see him as a guy that's going to help them get back to where they need to be, which is good luck to them.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a fair bit more to cover, but we'll probably almost wrap that one up here. Actually, no, we won't. I've got one more for you. Just let me find this article. So we mentioned before, I'm not going to find the article, I don't need to. So we mentioned before about, who was it? Broadford wanting to move out of the Outer East. And so one club that shifted league to Outer East and has shifted back is Hallam. What are your thoughts on Hallam moving from SFNL to Southern Football Netball League out to the Outer East, spent 1 year there, and then come back to the Southern?
Yeah, I find it quite odd, to be honest. I think I'm not too sure if there's been some committee changes and things like that. I'm assuming that there has been throughout that time. I thought if you were making the decision to move a league, you'd probably do that with the intent of giving it at least 3 years to sort of settle in and see where you're at. I don't think a year gives anyone any idea of where the club was at. So I think it's, the money it would have cost them to move across and then to now move back. That would, jumpers and all that sort of stuff that they're now going to have to get another new set of, because Southern's now got new sponsorships and things involved. I thought it was odd. Wish them all the best. I hope that, I found it strange that they chose to go out there to begin with. I thought Hallam's always been a pretty decent team within the Southern. They've always been up thereabouts. They haven't been a cellar-dwelling team for a long time. They've always been up there and doing all right. So it was quite strange to me.
from my understanding, I could be wrong because you can't really take what you hear as truth. But I remember I had a conversation with somebody quite heavily involved with Hallam at a league presentation night just before it was announced they were leaving Southern. And from my understanding was they wanted to shift to country. So they wanted to move to AFL Victoria Country. They wanted the netballs aligned. And I just, no knocking them, it could have been something where they had a 3 to 5 year plan in place. And after 12 months, they just went, this is untenable. If we keep this up, we might lose all these players that we've brought in. I also do feel, I'm not too sure how they went, but just in general, when clubs change leagues, and this is a prime example with Oakland Districts when they shifted leagues, for some reason, when the new leagues will put clubs in to play the division higher than what they actually really should be.
Yeah, and I think on the flip side, Southern has done really well at sort of judging when leagues have come to them which division they should be in. So it's been, I don't know if that's, like Southern Leagues teams are getting sort of rated higher than what they really are compared to others. But the point you made with the netball is an interesting one because something Southern, a lot of teams within the Southern have netball teams, but they all play at a central location. So I do understand the appeal of getting your netballers to play at the same venue and play against the same teams as you, as the country league teams do. That would be an appealing thing, I think. And I think hopefully in the future, the Southern gets to a point where the netball teams are, playing at the same venues and things like that, or across multiple venues against the same teams and things.
I think it's more just I don't think it's necessarily not enough netball teams. I think it's just purely because you look at the country leagues and, we go watch a lot of country footy with what we do at halfback, and you got the netball courts there. There's not many footy grounds that we go to that we've played at in Southern or when we've gone and filmed VAFA games or Metropolitan games where there's actually a netball court there. I feel like if Southern was to have maybe 3/4 of the league to have netball teams have a netball court at their venue, they would potentially shift. The other difference is a lot of clubs in Metro might only have seniors, like A grade, a B grade, maybe a C grade at tops, where you get to the country, you get there front of 16s like in the West Gippy, and they've got under 10s playing, and they finish in the seniors at bloody 3 o'clock. So they've got a full day worth of it. But speaking of clubs moving leagues, 2 clubs out of the VAFA, Ivanhoe and All Paradians, have been accepted into the Northern League. So they're shifting from VAFA to Northern, which VAFA seems to be losing quite a few clubs in recent years. I'm not too sure if it's what the cause of it is. Is it the fact that no salary cap in the VAFA, the potential missed revenue from things from the bar to the gate? But to see 2 clubs in space of a couple of weeks all shift across from one league to another, it's which has actually caused VAFA to completely restructure their league as well.
Yeah, so they've sort of restructured it down to 61 teams, 10 teams per division, with Division 3 will have 11. It's interesting. I think I said the revenue side of things is probably one that attracts people to the other leagues where they are able to charge gate. They are able to serve beer at different times compared to the VAFA. VAFA has pretty strict alcohol policies. You can only drink in the rooms and things like that. But VAFA's always been a league that's got a lot of history to it. I think that's why a lot of teams have always stayed within the VAFA. They probably don't even consider going elsewhere because it's this sort of, it's one of the old original Metro leagues, isn't it? So yeah. It is interesting to see teams leave. The flow-on effects could be interesting, especially with Old Paradians. They had a thirds team.
Okay, well, sorry. VAFA actually only lost a club not many years ago in St. Xavier Francis, who ended up becoming Narry South. So in the case of about 5, and South Mornington as well. So in the case of, 5 seasons, they've actually lost 2 to Northern, 2 to Southern. So they're actually losing clubs from different areas.
Yeah, and it's, again, the VAFA spans such a wide area. You could have teams traveling, metro-wise, but they're still traveling a fair way just to play within their league. And the divisions, there is 6 divisions of footy. They're sort of quite all over the place. And, you can't say, oh, I want to play teams close to me, because you could have a team that's going to belt you by 300 points every week and travel 20 minutes and you get to play a more competitive game. So it is a bit of an interesting one, but I think thirds is where, the Northern League doesn't have a thirds competition. So that'll be interesting to see if the old Paradians lose some of those blokes that were playing in thirds in VAFA is a pretty social sort of comp.
Yeah.
So you might get some of those guys that aren't willing to sort of step up and try and play twos footy. So I would expect to see a few blokes drop off from them.
And the other club is the Western Rams, who will be shifting from the Riddle district to the Western region. And the reason that they're shifting across is just purely based on the power, the strength of the league. So
they are, correct me if I'm wrong, but they have the longest losing streak in all of Vic football.
I'm pretty sure you are right. I did read that somewhere. I haven't got that written down, but
they're at 69 games lost, which that is tough. So you would be looking at any opportunity you can to sort of make a change to try and change your fortunes for the Rams. So hopefully changing leagues helps them out.
Yeah, so that will so they'll shift from the Riddle and they will move into so Western Region is going to shift to 2 divisions.
So they've also lost Deer Park and St Albans have both gone to EDFL.
They went last year. So they'll be in Division 2. And they feel like they'll be a bit more competitive. And you can never knock a team. Like, some people may sit there and go, well, they've just shat all over Western Region by saying it's going to be easier. But if you're getting, we know that leagues have different standards, and the thing is, leagues can be, the top divisions of 2 leagues can be neck and neck, can be pretty much, you put the top 3 teams in this top division, top 3 in this, and they're going to be, it's when you start dropping divisions where the gap in level of quality can happen. And that just purely comes from the area you're in. Like, you may have an area where you have just abundance of talent, and 3 suburbs over, there's none.
Yeah.
So I don't think, I think a lot of people might read those, they've already just, given it to Western, saying they're no good. But it's just, it's facts. Like,
and there's no guarantee when you've lost 69 games in a row. It doesn't mean you're going to walk into another league and win your first game in however many years, 3-4 years that's been. But it does show the bigger problem with Metro football altogether, isn't it? That there is such a big, stark difference between some of these leagues that cross over each other as well. Southern, VAFA, MPNFL have all got clubs within, walking distance of each other, and they're playing in 3 different leagues.
And the funny thing that you say that is you've gone VAFA, Southern, and MPNFL, and MPNFL isn't even a metropolitan league.
Yeah, which is it's crazy that they're not classed as a metro league when they're a handful of their teams all down the road from southern teams that are metro. So and MPNFL apparently tried to poach some teams, but then that all got knocked back. So there's been a lot going on with teams trying to move leagues and things. And
we will get into that. But I reckon that might wrap us up for the first episode of Talking Grassroots. So this will be out every Thursday. Thursday or Friday. I will determine when it comes out. Probably Thursdays, give people a couple of days to listen to it before the local footy kicks in. You can get it wherever you get your podcast, iTunes, Spotify, probably Google Play, I think, if that's still a thing, Amazon, if that's still a thing. You can also watch it on the Halfback Digital Media YouTube page. But, mate, thanks for joining us. And in the coming weeks, we'll probably start getting into a few top 5s and top 5 grounds that we've played at, top 5 grounds that we've filmed at. During the season, we'll be Halfback Digital Media, we go out and we film a lot of games of footy. We'll probably sort of talk about some of the things that we see, and I sort of wish we'd done this podcast this previous year, because there was quite a few, don't know how many times on a Saturday night I'd get home, get my games done, sit down, call you about what we did in the game that I just witnessed. But mate, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks, Matt.